Hello everyone. Central banks have been talking about the possibility of issuing a digital currency. Many of you have asked what is the difference with today's currencies. Most of the transactions in euro, dollar, yen or yuan are currently made electronically. So these digital currencies anyway? What is the difference? Let's talk about the differences. Today, when a central bank issues credit, basically increases its balance sheet, what it basically does, it purchases the sovereign bonds or the highest quality assets in order to free up the balance sheet of banks. What that does is make it more easy for banks to lend to the real economy. And the main backstop of monetary policy transmission is precisely demand. So in quantitative easing, the increase in money supply is always hedged, is always offset with the real demand for that currency. This is an important factor that avoids high inflation and the massive destruction of the purchasing power of the currency. Inflation and reduction of the purchasing power that exist anyway in many cases, but at least in quantitative easing there are a number of backstops that are constantly putting together the real demand for the currency with the supply in order to avoid massive inflation. There is inflation in financial assets, but it doesn't transfer to increase in poverty and lack of availability of goods and services like we see, for example, in countries that directly inject new money to government spending, like we see, for example, in Argentina or in Venezuela, and that generates huge inflation. Big difference between directly printing money for government spending than to conduct quantitative easing. When we think about digital currencies, the main differences would be the following. Citizens and businesses would have an account directly at the central bank. Then the central bank would have all of the information about the goods and services that we purchase, our investment, purchasing decisions, and savings decisions. Newly created money would be most likely fungible. Therefore, they would create money with a sell-by date that would need to be used in order to avoid saving in that newly created money. There's also an important risk factor, which is that by having the central bank knowing exactly what we're doing and with our money and what we decide to purchase and what we decide not to purchase, governments and central banks can decide unilaterally how to direct that newly created money. Obviously, it also eliminates all of the different limits to monetary policy that exist today. By making directly the newly created money be available in an account at the central bank, there is absolutely no limit to what the central bank can do with newly created money. It can direct it to the people that are politically or quote-unquote socially acceptable. It can direct it to the governments without any limit, without the limits created by the increase in debt and therefore the increase in yields if governments become insolvent or are not conducting adequate fiscal policies, etc. So what happens basically is that there is a tremendous risk that this newly created money will have absolutely no limit, and that there would be absolutely no possibility for citizens and businesses to put the brakes on monetary policy and to match real demand of money with new supply. More importantly, there could be absolutely no limit to government spending, and therefore crowding out of the real economy would be an even larger problem than the one that exists today. It is very dangerous to think about a digital currency from a central bank today when what we are seeing is that central banks are having significant difficulties in order to normalize policy because they have become hostages to governments that simply will not reduce deficit spending and that have not conducted structural reforms in the periods of low rates and high liquidity. The idea that a digital currency from China would be a threat to the US dollar or to the euro unless the euro and the US dollar decide to go digital as well is simply farcical. Nobody would decide to conduct business or consumption transactions in a digital currency in which the increase in money supply is limitless and in which the risk of surveillance and the risk of intervention and politically directed money creation is very large. As such, what we need to do is to return to sound money policies and not to think of ideas like this in an environment in which central banks are finding it so hard to normalize policy. Thank you very much. Thank you for watching this video. Please subscribe to my channel, like my videos, leave your comments below, and keep defending freedom. Thank you very much.